Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Premier Matt Freeman.
Can you hear me now, Scott?
Yes, clear and plain and coming through fine.
Well, that's good that you're fine, and I'm fine.
I agree with you. It's great to be fine. This week on the show, it is time, Matt, for another one of our Doof Canon episodes. What are these? What's this weird format we do once a month, Matt?
Well, once a month, those individuals that donate to us on Patreon at the Council of Doof level will get to collectively decide on a movie for the community to consider for entrance into the canon. Scott and I, and maybe some guests, will meet, talk about the movie, and then present our case for why it should or should not be admitted.
But as always, we leave that final decision up to you folks listening at home. So stick around, listen to our arguments, and then find a link in the show notes of this very episode to go cast your vote. Matt, what movie are our listeners going to be casting a vote about this month?
This month, the council has nominated the 1964 film Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Oh, wow. A classic in so many senses of the word.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be spending the first portion of this week's show discussing and debating this movie and whether or not it is worthy for the illustrious, the exclusive, the so insular and exclusive that I don't even remember all the movies that are in it. Doof Canon.
Right. Not even close. Couldn't even name half of them.
Couldn't. You know, it's so secretive, exclusive. Nobody knows, really.
It's the pinnacle.
Yeah. And then, Matt, I wanted to end this episode talking to you about something that I've had on my mind recently. I want to talk about criticism, specifically movie and TV criticism in the year of our Lord 2022. What does this look like? What is the state of criticism in the world we live in today?
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
We'll see how it goes. It's going to be a conversation.
Yeah.
But first, we've got to talk about Dr. Strangelove.
I shouldn't tell you this, Mandrake, but you're a good officer and you have a right to know. It looks like we're in a shooting war.
Hell. All the Russians above, sir?
Well, boys, I reckon this is it. Nuclear combat toe-to-toe with the Ruskies.
I don't like the look of this, Fred. I tell you what you better do, old buddy.
I was under the impression that I was the only one in authority to order the use of nuclear weapons.
That's right, sir. You are the only person authorized to do so. And although I hate to judge before all the facts are in, it's beginning to look like General Ripper exceeded his authority.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
An insane American general orders a bombing attack on the Soviet Union, triggering a path to nuclear holocaust that a war room full of politicians and generals frantically tries to stop.
This movie was written by Stanley Kubrick, Terry Southern, Peter George. It was directed by Stanley Kubrick. It stars Peter Sellers, and George C. Scott. And of course, it is one of the most well-known and beloved satires in the history of film. And Matt, I got to ask you, what did you think of Dr. Strangelove on this, what I'm assuming is your most recent viewing, not your first viewing?
Not my first viewing, although if I'm being totally honest, it's probably only my second viewing. And I love this movie. It's a great movie. It's to call it an unusual movie is like an understatement somehow. It's an extremely unique movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe like the reason I say that is I think the first time I watched it, I kind of didn't know what to do with it. The second time you watch it, you know what you're getting into, and then you're just able to appreciate the absurd comedy that it is.
Yeah.
So overall, extremely positive. Can't wait to talk about it, honestly. Like that's the thing about Kubrick movies is you can just kind of go endlessly deep on any particular thing. So I always look forward to talking about these. What did you think about it?
Yeah, honestly, you know, when I saw that this movie was nominated and was kind of handedly winning the vote, it's not that I was disappointed. I was just like, huh, okay. It's not that I dislike this movie. It's just always in my mind, there's other Kubrick movies I would go to first, right? The Shining, definitely. I really, really also enjoy 2001. And then, of course, Eyes Wide Shut, Kubrick's last film, is a movie I absolutely adore. I never would have put Dr. Strangelove at the upper echelon of Kubrick, although I always did enjoy it. But I'm so glad that this movie won, because I really got to sit down and watch it for the first time in a long time. And as you kind of always say on these shows, it is just a completely different experience watching a movie when you know you're going to be doing a show on it and having to pay attention to it and really think about it and explore it and parse it. And I fell in love with this movie. I fell in love with everything that this movie's doing, the cleverness. I think, honestly, the real truth is probably I just wasn't old enough the first time I saw it to really appreciate everything that the movie was doing. And I was finally on this viewing, and man, it's just delightful in every sense of the word. And I mean, one of the things I want to say here at the top before we really get into it, it's like less than 90 minutes long, which is perfect for this movie, because no scene in this movie overstays its welcome. Every comedy beat works and every bit of pointed satire works, and then we just move on from it. And I think it's one of the successes of this movie so much that it gets in, it does what it's doing, and then it gets the hell out of there.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and okay, so I have to say what's I totally agree with everything you just said, and yet it's a movie that's full of prolonged sequences of men pushing buttons.
Yes.
And I think that's one thing that maybe like didn't work on me, or I didn't understand what we were doing the first time I watched the movie, and then this time I'm like, okay, I understand exactly what we're doing. Like, this is funny. It's funny to me how they've built this intricate, layered system of like checks and balances and fail safes, and the consequence of all of this effort toward like making it maximally impossible to fail is that we're ending the world. Mm-hmm. Like the combined intellect of all of these smart people, these basically smart idiots functionally, have accumulated toward a pinnacle of technological development, which is going to wipe out the human race. And like it's all like the whole. I don't think I'm expressing myself very well. This always happens with Kubrick because the things he's expressing on the film are the reason he does them the way he does them is because it's so hard to articulate them otherwise.
Yeah.
And so the idea I'm trying to pin it down properly is like it just becomes funny to watch them go through all the motions of all of the like cryptography on the bomber and everything. Like, I'm just like smiling at how stupid this is. It's absurd.
It is. I mean, like, you're absolutely right that it did stand out to me this time just how much, like, the entire bombing run section of the movie where we're on the B-52 is just them staring at knobs and turning them and twisting them and looking at maps and top secret plans and reading off things, and it just really does demonstrate the absurdity of it all. And I mean, one of the things I love so much about the movie is we're kind of jumping ahead, I guess, is the ending. Mm-hmm. In that, yes, the world is destroyed, but that nobody learns anything, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's this moment where, like, the movie kind of wants you to say you have this incredibly ridiculous scenario where 20,000 things had to go wrong for things to end up the exact way that they ended up. And like, there's a moment where everyone thinks they've pulled back from the brink and they're all happy about it. And then, of course, no, there's the one plane left and it's going to trigger the doomsday device and we're all screwed. And then as the bombs fall and the world begins to end, everyone just starts redoing the things that they were doing anyway, which is, the general goes right back to mistrusting the Russians. The president goes right back to trying to position this to be most advantageous for him. The Russian ambassador starts taking pictures of the war room as if that even fucking matters anymore. Uh-huh. And then, of course, Dr. Strangelove himself, Peter Sellers, goes full of absurdity in that moment where he's like giving the Nazi salute and saying "Mein Führer," and like just loses. What I love about the Strangelove character is none of that is explained. Yeah. It's just this weird guy that is clearly a Nazi still, and but they don't care because he's saying the things that they want to hear, like, "Ooh, he will need 10 women for every man."
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, so yeah, all that is great. Strangelove has like an evil Nazi hand, basically, right? Like it's so silly. But then like that, what's funny is I want to talk about how successfully funny and silly the movie is, but like it's inextricable from the fact that like Dr. Strangelove is like explicitly based on a variety of real life figures, and
Sure.
the president is obviously based on real, I don't know, maybe Truman specifically, maybe
I
just
think
an
so,
amalgam
yeah.
of presidents we had around that time. And then some of these generals who had this attitude of like, yeah, we might get our hair mussed, but 20 million dead Americans tops. Just this psychopathic, like, I normally admire John von Neumann, the scientist, but he was the guy who was like, we should first strike Russia, and if we're not going to first strike Russia, then we should build up our arsenal to the point where if anybody does anything, if anybody makes a wrong move, we're going to wipe out all life on Earth, and everybody knows it. And it's like, oh my god, this is so insane. Like, and it's all true. Like, it's like the basically everything in the movie is true. Like,
Yeah.
plus or minus details,
So I obviously I want to spend a lot of this conversation talking about satire, right? Because I think I was thinking about this a lot because there was a movie that came out last year called Don't Look Up, which is a Adam McKay satire movie about climate change and the fact that we're not doing anything to stop climate change. And the way he builds this is he introduces the idea of a asteroid that is going to hit the Earth and that people just aren't doing anything about it and being insane. And when this movie came out, the people that really liked it compared it favorably to Dr. Strangelove and said, look, it's another satire on the level of Dr. Strangelove. I did not like Don't Look Up. I don't think it's a good movie, and I also think it's a bad satire. And I hadn't watched this movie in a long time, and so I was really kind of curious to go revisit this movie and see and try to get my head around why this movie works as a satire when that movie doesn't. Because one of the things I think I would have said about Don't Look Up is it's stupid and it's not really functioning as a satire when it's just pointing out things that are actually happening right now today. And I think that's the wrong thing to say, because I think Dr. Strangelove was indeed just literally pointing out things that were happening at the time, like just literally just shining a light on the absurdity of the way people were actually acting at the time. So that's not why I think Don't Look Up is a bad satire and this movie is a good satire. I think what it is, honestly, is in Don't Look Up, there are characters that are looking at this whole thing and pointing out how absurd it is, pointing out how ridiculous everyone's acting, pointing out how stupid everyone's being. Nobody in this movie does that. Everyone in this movie is an idiot and is stupid and is fully bought in and invested into the absurdity of the satire. And I think that's such a distinct difference here, that this is a movie in which there's no innocence here at all. Everyone is culpable for the absurdity of what is happening in this thing.
That's a really good point, yeah, because I think for a minute you think that the president is going to be the grown-up in the room.
No, he's not.
But then it's great because he's dressing down the general, who's clearly he's saying all this crazy stuff. But then he gets on the phone with the Russian premier, and then he just becomes ridiculous in a way where you're like, yeah, this is how international politics is conducted. It's like nattering between an old married couple.
Do you think you're sorry, Dimitri? How sorry do you think I am?
Yeah. Well, I know you're. Well, no, don't say you're more sorry than me. It's hilarious. Like you said, everybody's culpable. I mean, the only person who sort of comes out of things looking heroic is Peter Sellers' English Air Force officer, who is desperately trying to avert the disaster kind of on the ground floor. But like even that comes off as funny in a very dark way, because he's trying to deal with this guy who's lost his mind. And it's really hard to put my finger on why that's funny, actually, because if you just say what's happening it sounds terrible and totally serious. And it's not like Peter Sellers is being ridiculous in that scene. And the colonel or the general or whatever he is, he's also not being over the top. In fact, his performance is very subdued. But like the net result somehow is like electric. This is the magic of Kubrick. I never have more trouble pinning down what it is that's working about a movie than I do with Kubrick.
It's because it's everything. Like, I mean, like the thing is, and I swear I'm not going to make this whole conversation about how bad of a movie Don't Look Up is, but it's a terrible movie. That movie has one joke. It has one joke, and the joke is there's a comet coming to hit the planet and nobody's doing anything about it. Isn't that ridiculous? And this movie is exploring the failure of government to protect its people from every angle. And it's satirizing like 4,000 different things, all these different points of view, all these different failings and mistakes. Everything is in the crosshairs of this movie. Like, even at the end of the movie, like when he has to order the colonel to shoot the Coca-Cola machine to get change out so he can call the president to avert a nuclear disaster, the guy's like, you're gonna have to answer to the Coca-Cola Corporation. It's just like even corporations are in the crossfire of this whole thing. It's just every moment, every detail is saying something. I love peace is our job, I think is what the sign says. Peace is our profession. The sign that is just everywhere in the war room and around the military base. Yeah. And then especially the absurdity as we escalate the situation and when they're fighting to try to retake the Air Force base, they're like hunching behind the peace is our profession sign, holding rifles and shooting at each other. It's just everything is doing work here. Like, one of the other things I saw is when the general, George C. Scott, is like going through his whole spiel about why this is a good thing actually and they should take advantage of it. He's like hunched over a binder that just says world targets in megadeaths. It's just like when we talk, every time you talk about The Shining, you have to talk about just how Kubrick like layers everything with detail and tone and mood and like this is why there's that whole Room 237 documentary where people are just like gone insane because like he's put things that mean things in every inch of the frame. And I actually think that is absolutely what is being done here in every moment. Every bit of this movie is lent towards the satire, lent towards the joke. Like just the design of the war room as this giant ass table. And I think during the course of it, only 3 people at the table actually do anything, but it's like this giant ass table filled with all the most powerful men in the country and possibly Earth. And no one's doing anything except for like 2 of them. Like everything in this movie is lending towards the central satire of this whole thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. The you don't even notice the impact of the visuals consciously. Mm-hmm. I mean, what you just said is a perfect example. Like the fact that this is a giant room full of dudes and literally only 2 of them say anything until they bring the Russian ambassador in, and then 3 of them say anything. It's actually pretty. It's pretty interesting, right? It gives you this subconscious impression of the way this world works. That's I like that.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so one thing I want to talk about here, Matt. I want to talk about George C. Scott, mm-hmm. Who plays I forget even Colonel General something.
Everybody has hilarious names. Is my other favorite part of this movie. Yeah. Is it Turgidson?
Turgidson, yes. Peter Sellers gets a lot of credit in this movie because he's playing 3 characters and because he's Peter Sellers, who is just phenomenal and one of the funniest people who has ever lived. I think George C. Scott is doing some of the best work I've ever seen him in, and he is like an incomparable, incredible actor that has been in so many wonderful movies, right? I mean, Patton, 12 Angry Men, like he's just had this incredible career, George C. Scott. And I was blown away by how good his performance is in this movie. And it's not just like the script is very well written and the lines that Turgidson gets to deliver are just wonderful. But the way Scott is playing this character, man, it's so good. Like, just, I mean, we meet him, fucking his secretary, and he's like sitting there with in his boxers and an untucked shirt. And I love that moment where like he's talking to the general about like nuclear war, and he like slaps himself on his tummy and goes, well, this is what I would do. And then when he's in the war room itself and he's kind of explaining how everything went wrong exactly, he's chewing the most amount of gum. Like, he's just constantly putting a new stick of gum in his mouth the entire time. And it's just like, it's just fascinating little detail that like he's just constantly putting gum in his mouth. And so he's chewing gum while he's having this conversation about the end of the world. And I don't know, like his facial expressions, how he's moving his eyes, how he's leaning his head, how he's trying to sell what is an absurd thing, which is, well, I know we didn't order this attack, sir, but we could completely wipe the Russians off the face of the planet and only lose like 20 million people.
Yeah.
And he, like I said, this is in the satire, the characters and the actors have to be fully invested in the absurdity of it. If it doesn't work in a satire when you have people winking at the audience about how absurd this is, everyone needs to be fully invested. And I think George C. Scott is so fully invested in this character and everything. And it's, I couldn't believe how good of a performance this is.
Yeah. I think my favorite, S tier acting was basically the very end when the president's like, well, is there any chance that the bomber could actually make it through? And like part of him knows that the bomber making it through is the worst thing that could possibly happen. But he can't stop himself from being so excited about how awesome it is that this B-52 is like flying low enough to fry chickens in a barnyard, and you should see it, sir. Just and it's like it could, sir.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's such a like layered. I don't know. I don't know how you do basic acting personally, but I certainly don't know how you pull that off, where there's just so much going on with this character, and he's so believable, even though he's so absurd at the same time.
The lines are so good, man, but he really elevates them to something else. I think one of my other favorite lines is when the president says, "You assured me that the psych profiles you would do on these people meant that this would absolutely not happen." And his response is, "Well, sir, I don't think it's fair to condemn the whole program due to a single slip up."
Yeah.
When the slip up is resulting in nuclear war.
Yeah.
It's just like, that like is a completely dry, straight-faced read of that line that just works. And that's every bit of this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny. I'm looking at the stills now from the movie, and I'm appreciating your point, which is like, even when he's giving the B-52 speech about and he has his arms out like he's an airplane, in the background of the shot there's like 12 general looking guys and guys in suits, G-men standing there totally like blank, dead serious expressions, and with like, and like all of them have cigarettes in their hands in like the same position. It's just like this like uniform blankness, which just creates this amazing kind of contrast, I think.
Yeah. And the way he like in the right moments plays this general as kind of a child too. Like it's remarkable that he can go from being this like, when we first meet him, he's like this, he's the general, especially when we see him in his uniform and he's got his crew cut and he's just like, looks like this very official, formal man, but then like, when they invite the Russian ambassador into the war room, he just becomes like a child. He's like, "But Mr. President, they'll see everything. They'll see the big board." Yeah. And he's just so childish in that moment. It's just, and the way, man, the fascinating thing about this is the way Kubrick shoots so much of the stuff is he puts the camera on the table that they're all sitting at. And so every one of these characters is seen from this low angle, which normally would, make them seem more powerful and engrossing and commanding. But it almost oddly enough has the opposite effect here, where it makes them look large but absurd. It's like the camera's too close to them. It reveals their flaws in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think it's like slightly wrong on purpose in a way that makes them just seem ridiculous, and clownish.
Yeah.
Just
and why are you gonna have a table that big if nobody at the table's doing anything? It's just perfect.
Yeah, I love it. So George C. Scott, like you said, he's amazing. I mean, I honestly, Dr. Strangelove, the character is fun. What's funny to me though is you don't meet him until like more than halfway through the movie.
He's just been at the table silent, and then someone suddenly says, "Dr. Strangelove, what is this?"
Yeah, right. And then he has relatively few lines. I mean, he's a standout because he's by far the loudest part of the movie, the most ostentatiously absurd and ridiculous. But like my favorite Peter Sellers performance in the movie is actually the English officer.
See, I like the president more, but I totally understand why you would feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, the president's great. The English officer just I watching him just in his desperation to me is I don't know. To me, that's the most like earnest part of the movie. So like
sure,
it's because Peter Sellers gets to be the most ridiculous part of the movie, which is Dr. Strangelove, and then he gets to be the most earnest part of the movie, which is this English officer like desperately trying every trick in the book to try to get this this guy to tell him the launch codes, or persuade him. We see his realization of how badly things are going to go, and then we see him like sort of start calculating it, and then we see him kind of lose it briefly, and then like just try a series of gambits to try to persuade the guy. And I don't know, just like the whole evolution there is a great little short story, actually.
I
love that.
Yeah. I guess should we talk about like his performance, because most of what Peter Sellers is doing in this movie is improvised, right? Like kind of across the board with all three of the characters. I think the most is the Dr. Strangelove character. I'm pretty sure everything with the Nazi arm in the final moments is completely made up by Peter Sellers. And I actually read that like Kubrick just put like 6 cameras on him in that scene because he knew that like Peter Sellers does not redo things. So like if you don't get it in the first take, the next take he'll do something completely different. So if you don't get it, you're just not going to get it. And so he set up 6 cameras, and just like if you rewatch that scene, there's a lot of very quick cutting around, it just, the camera cuts a lot more than the average length of a cut in this film. And that's because the camera had to avoid everyone around Peter Sellers who was just losing their mind laughing at all the things he was doing in this moment. And I think you're right that it's weird that Dr. Strangelove himself is almost not satirical. He's almost like a farce. He's like, it's like the movie pushes the envelope from satire into farce. And I think it's because I think it comes in the perfect point in the movie where things have gotten so absurd that we're almost moving into that farcical moment. And he's allowed to live in that moment.
You're right, because Strangelove, he doesn't start out that way. He actually starts out like kind of serious. He like at first you kind of just think like, okay, this is a German, ex-Nazi missile scientist archetype. And he actually says one of the like smartest things in the movie, which is, he's describing the doomsday machine, and then he's like, but of course the purpose of a deterrence is negated if nobody knows about it. Why didn't you tell the world about it? But then also he just becomes more and more ridiculous, and then the whole 60 seconds of him like trying to like smash his hand into his lap to stop it from doing the Nazi salute. Mein Führer, I'm Mr. President.
Mein Führer, I can walk.
He
just suddenly cures himself at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
I love that, because that's just Peter Sellers deciding I'm going to stand up now, and now it's going to be in the movie, and it doesn't make any sense. But it doesn't have to make any sense, because what we're talking about now is them, going down and living in bunkers for the next 100 years and bringing 100 beautiful women for every man. And what was it that the general says is like, we can't get caught in the mine gap or something.
The mine shaft gap. Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. God. Yeah. The same exact madness and just like I think that's the key to the satire is it's like you take the idea as it exists and then you just extrapolate it in a way where it has become absurd and ridiculous, but also you can almost believe that people would behave this way.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I kind of want to go back to the B-52 crew because, you know, obviously you have Slim Pickens playing the main captain who's just perfect because I think I read that like James Earl Jones thought he was being a method actor and staying in character because he was continuing to talk the way his character talks, and that someone was like, no, that's just how Slim Pickens talks all the time. And he's just the perfect, like, I love his cowboy hat is in a safe on the plane and he like gets his cowboy hat out when he realizes they're going to war. But I mean, the interesting thing about, like, this is obviously a farce, but the crew of the ship really doesn't do anything absurd, right? Like all they're doing is just following the orders that they were told to do. Like none of them make any mistakes. Like the only really bit of absurdity in that is Slim Pickens, you know, riding the bomb itself down like a cowboy, which is just one of the most wonderful images ever put to film. But you know, for most of it, it's just you know, trained soldiers doing what they were ordered to do. They're just kind of going through, and as you said, the detail of them going through the motions of every step along the way that they're supposed to do, every fail-safe, every check, everything to make certain that things will not go wrong, I think really works to elevate the moments where everything is going wrong. Yeah.
Well, I want to zoom in on the suspense element of this because it's genius actually, because you desperately want them to fail. Yeah. But they keep working so hard and they're doing everything right. And, you know, they're using their ingenuity to solve problems. And, because,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say like that they keep almost failing and then you're like relieved and then they figure it out and they solve the problem. And it's a weird mental sensation because part of you is like, oh, I appreciate your ingenuity. But at the same time, no.
because they are in a different movie than everyone else. Because in the movie that they are in, the movie that they are playing in, they are the heroes. The Russians have attacked us. The Russians have, struck first, and this is a retaliatory strike meant to disable as much of them as possible before they wipe out. So they are saving the world from the Russian threat. And so every character in that scene is playing the movie as if they're about to be a hero, and we know better, but it is this it's really incongruous because in a different movie we would be rooting for these people. We would be like, yes, oh god, they're almost shot down, oh, they're not going to make it to the target, it's okay, we can get a different target. And then the juxtaposition with then cutting back to Peter Sellers being the president going, Dmitri, what do you mean they're not heading towards that target? Well, you're just going to have to shoot them down, Dmitri. It's just it's a real fascinating juxtaposition. And there's a different version of this movie where we don't see anything inside the B-52 at all, and I actually love that this movie includes this because it does really help. I think it makes the satire work more because we have this completely played straight heroic bomber squad that saves the world according to what they think.
We built it's showing this incredibly finely tuned machine that we built, not just the literal machine of the bomber, but the machine constituted of the U.S. Air Force and Missile Command and all of these interlocking pieces, and what an excellent machine it is indeed, and how it's like, wow, why the hell would we have built such a thing? Like this is obviously a terrible idea. Like I said toward the beginning, like all of this ingenuity and problem solving devoted toward a task which is blatantly just the worst thing you could ever do.
Well, and all because we underestimated the human element of just some random person deciding that they wanted to do this now, and all the fail-safes meant to prevent it from happening are now the fail-safes, ensuring it happens.
Yeah.
And like, well, I don't want to make a conclusion before all the data has come in, sir, but it seems the general has exceeded his authority. Oh, really?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of the movie. Is just like when the passing along of the news between characters, where everybody is trying to sugarcoat it as much as possible, even though it's the worst possible news that you could give.
And then the way Kubrick mixes stuff into this, like when the general secretary calls him when he's in the war room, and he has this whole conversation about, yes, no, we're going to get married. Like, he is literally like, the world is about to end, and like characters are still doing this whole thing. And it's just, it's so good, man. Like everything about this works. Like I can't believe how good this movie is.
Yeah. It's, I agree. It's great. I love it. I do think, if you've seen the movie before, but only once, maybe give it another look, because it really did land different for me the second time. Like, I think I was more disturbed by it the first time. Weirdly, I'm more amused by it this time, even though we're having a proxy land war with the former Soviet Union right now.
Sure. Yeah, it is a little weird, huh?
It's a little weird. So I've certainly been thinking about these things in a more serious way recently than I was probably the last time that I watched this movie. And yet the movie seemed more funny to me, I think, just because of how absurd the situation obviously is. And it's just, I don't know, it's a great takedown of like the idea that we have all of these, set aside the specifics of nuclear command, just like the idea that we have all these smart people who are the experts who are making decisions for us, and we can trust them, we can empower them, and they're so wise that they can weigh all of these weighty considerations and dangers and risks, and we're going to be fine. And it's like, they built a machine to destroy the world, and then they activated it. Cool. Not even a metaphor. It's not even like, that's the funny thing about Don't Look Up, is it's like they had to reach for a metaphor. This movie's about a thing that actually was happening and could have actually happened.
Although I love that the opening of the movie assures us that the United States Air Force says everything that happens in this movie could never have actually happened. No, that's ridiculous. It's great. Can we talk about some of the other names, because we haven't talked, like the general in charge of setting this whole thing off is named Jack the Ripper. Jack D. Ripper. One of the characters' names is Colonel Bat Guano. Slim Pickens' character is Major King Kong. I have a question for you, and I don't know if this is true, but the Russian ambassador, he looks made up to look like oh my god, I had his name when I was saying it, and then I forgot it. Hold on.
Is he a Russian figure?
No. He looks exactly like Orson Welles to me.
Oh, yeah.
And he looks like made up to look like Orson Welles.
Yeah, I see that, yeah.
And to the point where, like, when I first saw him walk onto the screen, I was like, Orson Welles is in this? That's crazy. But no, it's an actor named Peter Bull. I don't know why they would do that. And I'm like, I was frantically looking through the trivia before we started recording to see if they mentioned anything about that. But I don't see anything about that. And I'm so confused as to why we did that, other than like Kubrick probably was like, this would be funny if I was Orson Welles.
Yeah, that's one of those things where part of me wants to say, like, yeah, Kubrick probably did that on purpose, but the reasoning behind it totally escapes me. This is kind of my problem with Kubrick, is like, he's doing things like he's doing so many things that are working, but then he's doing things where I'm like, I don't know. So like apparently there's this whole idea that he had where the ramp up of the bombers entering Russian airspace and then dropping the bomb is meant to be this elaborate foreplay leading to sex metaphor within the film, like textually. And I'm like, man, that's pretty thin,
I don't see that. I don't see that.
Like, and that's the kind of thing where Kubrick himself is like, yeah, I was totally in there. And I'm like, okay, all right, if you say so, but like it's that what I just said strikes me as a weird kind of criticism, because it's not a problem with the movie. It's just an observation about his approach to filmmaking and how it's so different from, I think, the normal approach to filmmaking, that it yields these amazing products, but then also it leaves you with a bunch of confusing stuff that you don't know what to do with, because he had some idea that you're just never gonna figure it out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You're never gonna. That's just such a non-obvious. I mean, other than like I thought about this after I read about that, and I was like, okay, the closest I can get is that Turgidson is sort of a sex fiend, like he's very sex oriented.
Sure. I mean, that's established in our introduction.
That's established in his character introduction, and it's also the movie kind of ends with the characters being a bunch of lecherous old men and being like, oh, this is actually, the world ending is great because we're going to get to have harems. And but like that's the only place that sex really I mean, okay, it's a comedy, so sex is mentioned a few times, like with Jack D. Ripper saying, you know, I don't avoid women, but I deny them my essence, and just like it's such a bizarre character.
Yeah.
But I don't think all that adds up to like some, you know, thesis about how bombing Russia is like intercourse.
Yeah. And I'm trying to even look at the big board to see if there's any like sexual imagery there to go along with this, and I'm just not seeing it. So I mean,
agree,
sure, Kubrick, do whatever you want, man. Like that's fine. I don't see it, but if you want to say that was in there intentionally, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could argue that the plane is just a penis with wings, if you really want to.
Yeah.
If you really want to go there.
Or yeah, right. or I mean, you could say it's like the sperm and the. I don't know, man.
I guess.
Again, I don't like this. I'm only mentioning it because it struck me as an interesting fact about Kubrick's approach to movie making.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, man, you know what the thing about Kubrick is? I have no idea what kind of person he was. like we have not done a Deconstructing Kubrick series, but I'm relatively confident that like I'm not sure I would know who he is after watching all his movies, because like all his movies seem like very dark and dour and self-serious, and then you have this movie and I was like, was Kubrick a jokey guy? Like is that what he was like? I don't know. Like which personality more aligns with him? Is it Dr. Strangelove or is it fucking Clockwork Orange?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't either. You know, I mean, there's a lot of mystique surrounding Kubrick. Like people will say that he's this incredible genius, and you know, he is like this like chess wizard, and just like and I'm like I feel like, I mean, he's probably a really really smart guy, but like I feel like every director that we've covered for our Deconstructing Directors series is a very 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 smart, competent human being.
Sure.
And they're all also doing really really interesting, complex, layered, thematic things with their movies. So like, but I don't necessarily know that Kubrick isn't the greatest genius to ever approach film. I just have this feeling like, because he died relatively young and because he's made these movies that are like so kind of rich and in a sense impenetrable, he's built up this mystique of like, well, no one's as good as Kubrick. And that's not the same thing as me saying he's overrated. I do think I do think that the mystique obscures attempts to analyze, actually, because you're like, oh, I'll never understand it. He's just so smart. It's like, no, come on, we can figure it out. You know?
I just think like he had such like a string of like all-time classics that like it's hard to argue that he's not an incredibly talented director. Like I mean, like Spartacus, Lolita, Doctor Strangelove, 2001, Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, Shining, Full Metal Jacket. Like these are like all-time movies. Barry Lyndon is okay. It's not the best, but like the rest of those like are like classics in their respective genres. So like it's hard to argue against him being an incredibly gifted, talented, and brilliant director. But
Sure.
I mean, I wonder, like this movie in particular, like would we be still talking about how good of a satire this is if it was directed by someone else? Is it like what is it that's elevating this movie to greatness? Is it that the script is just so incredibly clever and well done, or is it Stanley Kubrick's a genius? And I mean, obviously it's probably a little bit of both, but I'm curious, like if I really would think about it, which does it lean more towards?
Definitely the script is a huge part of it. Like I will, and I believe, screenplay is by Stanley Kubrick and two other people.
Yeah. He definitely helped with it for sure.
So he deserves credit for that. But like, yeah, I actually think that the script is just perfectly nailing down everything that's important, and then through his direction and through the acting and everything that's elevated. It's a fantastic script, though. Definitely very, very.
It's really good.
Of course, what you said about the improvising, it's like somehow I don't know, like was Sellers improvising like lines? Because that actually seems hard for me to believe because of how kind of tight the script seems.
I mean, yes, but not all of them, obviously. Like he plays 3 characters. And he but no, I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't know enough to say one way or another for sure, but I don't think, like, obviously some of the intricacies of the dialogue is just so good that like I don't think Sellers could even one of the best improvisers ever could do that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Have you seen the Pink Panther movies?
One of them when I was young, so I don't really remember.
I love those movies so much, and like I have such a soft spot for Peter Sellers. Like I just love him so much, and so like every time I watch anything with him, and I'm like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah, no, definitely, he is great.
Did you know Kubrick only won 1 Oscar?
No, I don't think I knew that. But
it was for visual effects in 2001. That's the only Oscar he had.
That's so weird.
He was nominated a bunch of times, but
I mean, he definitely makes weird movies,
Yeah.
He has all those movies you listed, like none of them are like, let's go get some popcorn and watch a flick. Like they're all,
Sure.
even, I was gonna make a kind of a comparison to, the fact that we're doing the Ridley Scott Deconstructing Directors series right now, and how like, okay, yeah, every one of Kubrick's movies has been this genre-defining film, but like, hey, the first several of Ridley Scott's films were also genre-defining films. Like he's definitely, a genius of filmmaking, but at the same time, like Ridley Scott, he's making, a genre horror film. And Kubrick's movies never really fall that comfortably into genre niches. And I think that makes them less sort of mass appealing, actually.
I would be interested in, I've never actually looked at this, and I don't really have time to do it while we're sitting here talking, but like how many Kubrick movies were appreciated in their time? Like how well did these movies do financially, critically, in the moment, and not years later when people look back at them and say, oh yes, 2001 is actually brilliant. Like I'm sure 2001 did okay, but I'm sure it wasn't like a huge money maker,
Yeah. I think you're right. I don't actually know the answer to that though.
But yeah, that would be interesting to look into for sure.
Yeah. So
I mean, looks like 2001. The problem with box office stuff is like with all these classics, it always includes like re-releases. So like, it looks like 2001 cost $12 million and grossed $60 million, but I don't know if that's counting 40 years of re-release and re-release and re-release, so.
Sure, it probably is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think obviously this is a great movie that I think is held in very high esteem these days, but who knows? I guess the last thing I'll ask you, Matt, is this movie was done in black and white. And obviously this movie came out in 1964. They had color films in 1964. So why do you think the decision was made to make a black and white film?
I think it just, it makes it feel like it's older. And for audiences at the time, maybe it was meant to make it seem like this is from the 50s, which I don't know if that's, honestly, I have no idea the way people in the 60s thought about this kind of thing. That's my best guess though.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, it also kind of makes it feel like, like news footage a little bit. There's a lot, like you think about like wartime news footage back in the World War times, and like you see it in black and white, and it gives it that feel to me.
Yeah, and I don't know. It makes it seem, funnily enough, it makes it seem more serious, even though it's a comedy. Which maybe that's one of those things, like you mentioned, like the shots are composed in a way that you would think would make you think these characters are to be taken seriously, but actually it makes you see them as clowns. The black and white maybe emphasizes that effect. Like when you see somebody in black and white and they're acting like a clown, then that almost highlights how wrong that is and how absurd that is.
Yeah. And it also does really interesting thing with the lighting too, because you have, just shades of black and shades of white. And so when characters are lit by, like, I love the war room table and the circle of lights around it, this kind of halo of lights that really harshly lights every single one of the characters based on where they're sitting. And I feel like the black and white serves to emphasize that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I like that.
It's just really, really great all around. So, I mean, I think we're here at the end of the conversation, Matt. What do you think in voting wise? Do you think, we had very, very good things to say about this movie, but do you think it's worthy of being in our canon?
I lean toward yes. I'm trying to think of a reason why I would say no.
We could always go back to our standard rule that isn't really a rule, which is if this was the only Kubrick you could put in, would it be this Kubrick? Yeah,
and I think maybe I have recency bias here, but I would actually lean toward yes, because it's sort of it's weird minor Kubrick, and it's fun, and I feel like everybody already knows that The Shining is great, and everybody already knows The Full Metal Jacket is great. But this movie, I think maybe gets overlooked, and so if the purpose of the list is to say these are great movies that you might have missed or overlooked, then I would say that this movie belongs on that list.
Sure. I think that's fair. I think I'm going to say yes to one, because the rule I just talked about isn't a real rule. And two, I think for the very reason you said. I mean, I still, as much as I loved this rewatch, I still don't think this is my favorite Kubrick. I like being different and saying my favorite Kubrick is Eyes Wide Shut, the final movie he made, because that's just a delightfully wonderful, weird ass fucking movie with Tom Cruise in it, who I adore. Love that movie so much. But I mean, The Shining is probably the best Kubrick for me. I like 2001 a lot, but that's such that's a long, the opposite of this. That's a long, long, long movie.
Yeah, that's a weird one. Like that one's downright difficult to actually watch. I would say
that's the interesting thing is like parts of it are really fat. Like everything with Hal is like you're glued to the screen, but like we take a long time to get there.
That's true. I mean, I think you could say a similar thing about A Clockwork Orange, where like parts of the movie are almost like a little episode. It's like, wow, this is so engaging, and then parts of it are you're like, I don't. This is so abnormal that I don't know what to do with it. Which is then that's the stuff where you walk away, and then that's like in the back of your mind for the entire rest of your life, because you're trying to process it and figure out what was going on there, and which is, I think, intentional on his part. Like, I think he loads these movies up with a bunch of weird, like unusual stuff and visual stuff that is not meant to sit comfortably within your expectations. And
Sure.
And he knows that you're going to walk away trying to figure that out, and that's part of his design.
Let me tell you what's a weird experience is. Being a 12-year-old boy, unable to sleep, turning on HBO at 2 a.m. and finding Clockwork Orange like 10 minutes in and just being like, oh, looks like a weird 70s movie. I guess I'll watch it. Man, that shit fucks you up real bad. I don't think I've ever fully recovered from that.
Fascinating. I'm learning something about you today, Scott. I'll have to figure out what this means.
It's one of those things where like you don't even know what you're watching, right? Because for the young people out there, this was in the before times when the TV didn't tell you what was on the TV. You just went to channels and there were things on. So you either went to the TV Guide channel, which is even then a relatively new invention at the time, that slowly scrolled through every channel and told you what was on it, or you looked it up in your TV Guide magazine. Neither of which I did. So I was just watching a movie that I had no idea what it was or what was going on. And I didn't even realize it was Clockwork Orange until years later when my dad said, when you're older, you're going to have to watch Clockwork Orange. And then I never said, did it. When he showed me some of it, I was like, yep, did that already, Dad.
Yeah. That's baked deep into the brainstem already, Dad. Sorry.
All right. So I think that's 2 yeses from us, but I'm very interested to hear what our listeners think. What do you think of Dr. Strangelove? Do you think that it is a satirical, wonderfully made movie that is worthy of interest in the canon? Or do you think that there's a better movie that should be put in its place? So let us know. Yes or no. Don't forget to click the link in the show notes that will lead you to our Patreon account, which is where you can do the voting. You do not have to have an active Patreon subscription to us to vote. It will be a public poll. But unfortunately, as we say every time since I learned this, in order to comment on that poll, you will have to have a Patreon account, just not one that's subscribed to us. Do you need a? I think you need.
I think you need an account. Otherwise, people could vote a million times, right?
No, you definitely need an account. But I think in order to comment, you have to be an active patron, which I think is so stupid because it's a public poll. If it's a public poll, anyone should be able to comment, but I think only patrons can comment. So if you're not a patron and you want to comment about this, you can do so on our email, doofmedia@gmail.com, or on the subreddit r/doofmedia, where there will be a post for this episode. So I hate that, Matt. I hate it. I want to do the voting elsewhere, but it's the best and easiest way to do it in a way that ensures that people don't manipulate the vote or vote many, many times and things like that.
Sounds good.
Doof. All right, Matt. I want to talk to you about criticism. And I want to set the stage for this a little bit here, because you and your brother did an episode of The Freeman Bros, which is your Patreon exclusive bonus podcast that you do once a month. You guys normally get together and talk about a lot of things. And by a lot of things, I mean, it's usually like AI,
robots,
90% of the time.
AI, space. Those are the topics.
Yeah. But one of the things you were talking about this month that I was listening to your podcast the other day was I forget exactly what was going on, but you were talking about getting meaning from the work you were doing and how individuals can do that. And you mentioned that there was I forget what it's called because it's a term that I had never heard of before. But the idea that there was a person working at an organization once that would walk up to people during his lunch break and be like, what is the biggest problem in your line of work? And then when they told you, his response would be, what are you doing to solve that problem right now? Which is something I never heard of, but it got me thinking.
Yeah. So just for context, the guy's name is Hamming, and so that's called the Hamming question. And yeah, it is thought provoking, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think every time a person hears this for the first time, they go, "Huh." So yeah. Tell me your thoughts, Scott.
Yeah, so it got me thinking, and the first thing I did was I thought about my day job. What is the biggest problem in my day job? And then after I did that for about 30 seconds, I was like, this sucks and it's boring. I don't want to think about it. So moving on. And then I said, oh, wait, I have a second job, and that is to do film criticism. And even saying that makes me feel uncomfortable. Matt, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to a place where I'm okay calling myself a film critic, despite the hundreds and thousands of hours that we've spent doing this. But it still makes me uncomfortable just thinking about that. Regardless, I asked the question, what is the biggest problem right now in the world of film criticism? And moving aside the monetary one, which is that, there's not enough money in it to actually make a career out of it anymore. I spent a long time thinking about criticism generally, and what is criticism in 2022, and I think we kind of have to define that in order to outline what are the problems with it in 2022, right? I think that's true.
I think we probably do, but that is to me that's a tall order, actually.
Sure.
I mean, you came to the table having thought about this already. I don't really even think about what I do as criticism. I kind of have a definition for what I'm trying to do, but it has more to do with figuring out why and how things work in film or TV or even video games. It's more of an exercise in curiosity for me. Now that's me. I'm not. So you talk about criticism. You talk about what you think about this, because I almost am like, I don't even think about this stuff.
Sure. I mean, like I do. I spend a lot of time reading film criticism. I spend a lot of time thinking about film criticism. And I mean, like, I think the problem with defining it in these day and age is I think everyone goes to critics for different things, right? I mean, they're like, I think broadly we can divide this into two different groups, right? There is the people that seek out film criticism solely to know, is thing good or bad? People who have a very limited amount of time, cannot watch everything, want to go to the movies on Saturday, and they don't want to see a bad movie. So they open up Rotten Tomatoes and they go, okay, which of the 5 movies playing at this theater today is most good? I will look at what the critics say and distill it down into mostest goodest, and that's the one I will go see. Aggregator sites like Rotten Tomatoes are actually remarkably good at doing that, right? At accomplishing that general mission of helping people make informed decisions about the things that they spend their time watching. But I think there's another big part of criticism, and I think this is what criticism has classically been, and what to me criticism can and should be doing, which is kind of exactly what you said. It is to help people understand the art that they're watching. So and I think that these two forms of criticism differentiate themselves by a thing you would read before you go see a movie, and a thing you would read or watch or listen to after you have seen a movie. And obviously you and I, for the most part, fall into the second half, right? Every single conversation we have about the movies, I think, would be terrible to listen to unless you had actually watched the thing. And so the value this provides to me is, people either don't think about these things or don't have the equipment because they don't have time to think about these things, or just, don't have as much background that is required in order to really understand what a movie is doing, why it's good, and what it could be saying, and to help you appreciate it on a level perhaps you hadn't appreciated it before. So that's my goal, and that's what criticism is to me.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I guess under that line of thinking, I think one of the biggest problems with criticism right now is that, like, it's not, I don't want to say it's bias. It's not bias, because every bit of criticism is biased, right? Every single person approaches film from their own individual, unique perspective. And so what they take out of something is going to be informed by what they bring into it. But I do think one of the things I'm seeing in criticism a lot lately is we really want to talk about, do the politics of the thing align with my politics? and that is the measure of whether something is good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I immediately tap out if whatever I'm watching or reading is doing that. I it's not even a protest. I just lose interest because I'm like, this is not anything that I'm interested in. This is not how I approach things. This is not how I think art should be thought of or treated, and it's boring to me, and I tap out.
Which is, by the way, not me saying that art is not political. All art is political, obviously. Yes, that is 100% true. But it's not just that we're, trying to suss out the politics of art. It's that we're holding the politics of the art up against our own personal politics and judging it on its adherence to or deference to those politics. And it gets things like when we talked about the Joker. This is actually one of the things that annoyed me the most, because I don't think the Joker is a very good movie, and there's a lot of reasons why I don't think the Joker is a very good movie. The one that is the least true is because the politics of the movie are bad, like quote unquote bad. I like, there's all this talk about how dangerous this movie is going to be, and like it's reinforcing a political ideology and belief that is going to get people hurt, and I'm just like, I don't find that valuable. Like, it's not a thing that I take any value out of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, that's not even doing criticism. That's doing politics and pretending you're doing criticism. There's a lot of different things that are operating under the umbrella of criticism. Like
sure.
that's the problem, actually. Like, and they're hard to extricate from each other. So for example, one thing that I'm thinking about as you're going through this, and I'm letting myself think about how I think of these things, is like, there's a big difference between analysis and judgment, but at the same time, it can be hard to extricate analysis from judgment, because I don't know, just random podcast we did recently, let's say Alien. What I'm usually trying to do is what I would think of as analysis, which is trying to figure out why things worked, trying to examine my reactions to things, trying to imagine what the creator was thinking and why they may have done something a certain way. What ends up happening, what gets taken along, for the ride, is that I'm doing judgment. I'm saying, I love this. This is great. This works so well. Love this movie, right? I think that's just part of being a human, is you either hate something or you love it, and then you're going to connect that to your analysis. Sure. Especially if it's a piece of art. A piece of art is designed to elicit an emotional reaction generally. And I think that, like, so much of the criticism that I see is just like 12 reasons why the Wheel of Time was bad. and it's like, I wish I could succinctly say what's wrong with that. Like, it's fusing together. Well, first of all, you didn't enjoy it. Person who watched The Wheel of Time and then made the YouTube video, clearly you didn't enjoy it, and now you're looking for things that you can add to your argumentum about what's wrong with The Wheel of Time. And to me, that's not real analysis. That you're just griping. And it's like, well, okay, Matt, what's the principal distinction between griping and real analysis? You smug bastard. And it's like, I don't know, but I do know that, like, this is why I don't like to just shit on movies. Like, this is why we avoid doing those episodes, because the quality of the analysis is usually pretty poor, actually.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think there are kind of two separate problems here in my mind. I think you're absolutely right that the listicle tear down bullshit that we see constantly is a plague, and I hate it so much. I did see it's probably on my YouTube because I was on the Doof Media YouTube and you watched it, but like, the Wheel of Time failed, and here's why. Right. And I'm like, well, hold on. I mean, like, how are you defining failed in this regard? Like, right. they made the show. There's a second season coming out. So what's failed? But I mean, what you mean is I didn't like the Wheel of Time, which is fine. It's fine. And obviously, it's like, we talk about movies we don't like all the time. It's not like talking about a movie you don't like is not what I'm complaining about here. I think you said something really interesting when we were kind of laying out our terms, which was curiosity. And I think that is something that is so important, that all movies should be approached to with curiosity. And I think, the second what I'm seeing a lot in, especially, YouTube type criticism, is the second a movie doesn't check a specific box for me, like it's you turn off your curiosity factor. And like the second a movie does check that specific box, like this movie had good politics, ergo great movie, you stop talking about like why the movie's actually good, and you just talk about why those politics are good. And like the thing with me is, it's not even like I disagree with a lot of those opinions, right? Like politically, I'm usually aligned with what people are talking about. Usually, not always, but usually. It's just like that to me is like the most boring way to view. Like I wonder like what this type of criticism is called, because there's structuralism, like there's different lenses through which you can critique art, and I wonder what like if there's a term for the modern like politicism or something, like viewing all artwork through the lens of your political ideology. And like, look, it's not to say that doesn't have value, but I feel like, at least in the world of online, that is what so much of the criticism I read or listen to or watches these days is like, this movie had bad politic and therefore bad movie. Like, I mean, one good example of this is like Nomadland from a couple years ago. How like great movie that I really, really enjoyed, but for a lot of people, too kind to Amazon movie, ergo bad movie, bad. And I just like, I hate that shit. Right. I hate it so much.
I think that to go back to my analysis judgment dichotomy, I think the problem is that it's actually quite damaging when you fuse analysis and judgment into like the same mental movement. And what's happening when those people do that is, so it would be analysis to say Nomadland actually depicts a surprisingly nuanced and neutral picture of many of the bad circumstances that the characters find themselves in. The film refuses to use the tools of filmmaking to exaggerate the negative qualities of the things that are happening, and it depicts them in a very matter-of-fact way. That's kind of my attempt at the analysis part of that, and then the judgment part of that comes in and says, because they refuse to condemn those things film-wise, they're bad people and the film's bad. And it's like you just mashed all of that together into one like glorp. Whereas like the first half of that, I feel, is actually kind of interesting. What's funny is I didn't actually think of that while I was watching that movie, but now that you point it out, it's like, it's kind of interesting how the movie actually kind of refuses to what's the word I'm looking for? It refuses to dramatize certain things. It refuses to sentimentalize certain aspects of what's happening. It's like bad things are happening, but the film is not using the techniques of film to make you to it's not doing the Spielberg thing where it's like, I'm going to make you cry about this. It's being fairly documentarian about it. That's interesting. That's an interesting observation. Why is the film doing that? What are they going for? Interesting. I'm curious. It's so flattening and just like just dumb and boring to just be like, the movie didn't pander to my sensibilities politically, and so it's bad,
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting angle to go for, because like and I will say, one of the things that makes this whole conversation very difficult is the way the internet works these days. Like, is this really reflective of the criticism, the culture of criticism at large, or is this just the thing that the algorithm is continually shoving down my throat to make me feel like my view on where criticism is broadly is this right now? And I don't know the answer to that question. I think probably a little bit of both. I think probably I am seeing a very specific portion of the critical audience right now but also I think this is just kind of the general state of criticism. I think, post-Trump era, we are very like aware of politics in a way that I hadn't seen before, which is not that we weren't aware of politics at the time. And I don't want to make this thing entirely about politics. I just like, I think there is a class of criticism I'm seeing that is like, movie needs to explicitly tell me that a bad thing is bad. And if it doesn't do that, then movie is bad. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've seen this like with anti-heroes, like there's that stupid viral tweet that went around about how The Shining is bad because Jack Torrance is clearly a bad person. And you're just like, yeah, no shit. But I mean, those are like outlying absurd examples of this idea. But like, this is kind of something like, I think the movie Parasite, let's talk about this again. A movie that I fucking love. I love that movie to death. And one of the things I love about the movie so much is because I think it's doing a very clever, nuanced thing about the cyclical nature of the structural economic systems in place in the world and how they make us all monsters. Right? I think it's a really interesting, fascinating thing. Mm-hmm. And everything I read about Parasite was like, see, this is why capitalism is bad, because the poor people, the evil rich people and the poor innocent poor people. And I'm like, did you not watch the movie where the poor people like did the same thing to the people under them that they perceived under them? Like the whole point of the name Parasite is that everyone in this movie is a parasite. Yeah. They all like leech off of each other. And it's a movie that I think is incredibly nuanced and complex. And I wanted to see more people talking about that. Yeah. It feels like that is crosses the line of no, we have to make sure that we understand that I think rich people are bad, and therefore I have to say these rich people are bad. And if I even broach nuance of, hey, the poor people did some pretty fucked up things too, actually, maybe the system is damaging everyone and fucking everyone over in specific ways. Yeah. It's not that you empathize with the rich people, but you can maybe understand how they became the type of people that would act this way and dismissively, because when you're in a system that sets you up in these layers, like it becomes very easy to just slide into your layer and stop seeing the people below you as real people, but just impediments or tools to be used to remain at your layer, which is what everyone in this movie does. Every single person in the movie does that, regardless of how much money they have.
Yeah, right. I agree with everything you said there. I mean, I think that the funny thing to me, the thing that makes most of that criticism sort of vacuous is like it is literally just people like stamping the most sort of acceptable possible interpretation onto the thing and then calling it a day. Mm-hmm. Which is funny. And now I'm not saying that the creator's interpretation should be held as the correct interpretation, but what was funny to me about Parasite is all of these American critics saying like, "God, it's so amazing that they made this movie about capitalism and about the flaws of capitalism," and the creator was like, "I was making a movie about South Korean society." I was not making an allegory. I was making a movie about the society of the country that I come from, and interpret all you will. Like, great. You know what? That's what's great about art is you can extend it to other things, but it's very boring when you just extend it in a way that you know is going to get you like, yes, good job, you have the correct political opinions. And
right.
I'm just so bored of that.
And that at the end of the day is my biggest problem with it. It's not that I disagree with your political opinions at all. Hypothetical person out there making this opinion. It is that I think this is the most boringest way to approach the idea of analyzing art, of saying, okay, here's my list of beliefs. Let's go down this movie. And yes, this checked 3 of 5. Ergo, it's a good movie. And I will gladly talk about the ways in which it checked those things. It just seems to me that like movies are complex and nuanced, especially good movies are complex and nuanced. And I want more people to talk about that nuance. And it feels like we're just like, no, this movie's great because it make me feel like I believe the right things.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be blunt, like I think a lot of these people are criticizing. Their role as a critic is embedded in a framework of some kind of political identification, and they actually don't feel mentally free to even think about those things. Like when they see a movie, they've got a little subroutine in their brain that's doing political analysis before it's even allowing them to enjoy the movie, and that's sucks. And I try not to live that way. I try, but like I'm right. Like what I'm talking about. Like the people who make the YouTube videos or the posts that you're referring to, like these are people who would you sort of know they'd get in trouble with their social sphere if they if they had that nuanced take on Parasite, right? And it's like, well, what actually happens with human beings is it's not even like that person has the nuanced thought and then thinks, well, I can't say that, I'll get yelled at. They don't even have the thought in the first place because their brain just filters it out. And that's like a bigger social problem than it is a problem about criticism. Yeah. But the consequence is it results in a lot of really boring criticism.
And by the way, I am incredibly guilty of doing this at times. Like I don't want to set myself apart and be like, we are doing the good criticism and everyone else is doing the bad criticism. I have succumbed to this many times where I got pissed off at a movie for one reason or another and decided that the movie was bad because I was pissed off of it for one reason or another, and didn't approach it with the curiosity that I should. That has definitely happened to me at times, especially times of like great political upheaval when I'm more sensitive towards specific thing X than I would be. Like, a good example of this is when we were reviewing Worm, and it was right after the fucking Charlottesville thing, and we got to a chapter in Worm that was about the Nazis, and I was like, fuck all these people, I don't give a shit, I don't want to read about it, I'm pissed off, and I don't want to do it. And so I just like refuse to engage with the material, right? And I think that's actually like a criticism that Worm gets a lot these days, is like, man, they really tried to do something nuanced with some of those Nazi characters, and like that doesn't mean like the book is pro-Nazi, right? It's clearly not. But
it's that just causes me physical pain. But because it's like the book is if anything textually, anti-Nazi, but it's explaining how a human being can find themselves in a situation, right? And it's like, isn't it horrible that this human being like got this particular was victimized in this way and was pressured into being this way, and like it's a complicated and I think realistic way that these things actually operate. Like you're actually just misunderstanding the world if you have this. I don't want to talk about it. It's stupid. It's so shallow. Like I know, man. Like I agree. Like sometimes we just don't like something, and sometimes I just don't like a book or a movie, and I'm, there have been book clubs where I'm just like, I didn't like this book, having a real hard time finding anything good to say about it, and I don't know.
I mean, that is like one of the things, and I think something in general we've tried to avoid as much as possible, like content creation as far as criticism is a machine, right? Mm-hmm. And the machine requires constant fuel. Mm-hmm. And what that means is people are almost constantly reviewing stuff that they might just not have anything to fucking say about, right? Like there are movies I watch all the time that I'm like, I'm fucking glad we don't have to do an episode on this because I have nothing to say about this movie. Fucking Moonfall, a movie about how the moon falls into the earth. I got nothing to say about this fucking movie. But like if I was working as a full-time critic, I would have to come up with something to say about the movie. And so when you're sitting there at your desk, desperately trying to pull something to say, and you don't care about the movie, that's when you start talking about the things that you do care about, which in this case, for a lot of people, is the political situation in our country, or just the things that I'm concerned about in this moment, the things that I care about, the things that I'm worried about.
Or the things are going to get clicks, which is
very true.
Which is another thing that happens, right? Like, clearly.
Sure.
So
yeah, like the person who wrote that, like Jack Torrance was a bad guy and therefore the movie's bad. Like that, the reason why his editor published that article was because they knew people would be mad at it and get clicks. Like this is Yesterday was Star Wars Day, Matt, and I'm so mad I clicked on this thing, and then more mad that I sent it to you and made you click on the thing.
I didn't click on it because
so proud of you.
I knew what was happening, and I was like, this is it's fine, Scott. I forgive you, but I'm not gonna click on it.
The post was, and I'm not going to put it in the show notes or anything either because I don't want anything to click on it. But the post was, the Star Wars movies aren't worth the hype. They're not funny, and the biggest twist was totally predictable, which I don't care if you actually have that opinion. First of all, I don't care anymore. But in the course of the article, the author said, I haven't seen any of the Star Wars movies except for The Force Awakens. That's the only one they saw was The Force Awakens. And they wrote an article about how the Star Wars movies aren't that good. They're overhyped, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, oh, this was just literally written on Star Wars Day specifically to get people to get pissed off and click on it and be like, what the fuck are you saying?
Yeah, they let anybody write things on the internet, So.
And so like the thing that's frustrating to me in this whole thing is there has never been more content than there is right now. And so the role of a critic to do both of the things that we talked about, A, point out things that are good so people will watch them, and B, help people understand things that they've watched even more, has never been more important because there's too much shit out there. You can't watch it all. Having a person that can lead you towards the good stuff and help you understand the good stuff is really, really important. And yet we have this stupid shit like listicles and these fucking clickbait bullshit things, and then getting furious at the Joker because you watch the trailer and it seems like it's going to kind of be a little bit right wing, a little maybe. I don't know about this. It's just a waste of fucking time when your job has never been more important than it is right now.
I think you're right. I mean, I hate to be the guy who has the same solution to every problem, but like I really think curating your media environment, and to put it bluntly, like just blocking the people who consistently bring that kind of shit into your feed, be it whatever, wherever it is you're seeing that stuff. Like, don't. I've unsubscribed, I've blocked, I've unfollowed people who I think are actually good content creators, because every once in a while they'll just have something that's so annoying is too weak of a word. It damages me to see it. I like you've imposed a mental cost on me to have to think the type of stuff we've been talking about today, where you're like, man, my day would have been better if I hadn't been exposed to the fact that somebody has such a bad take. And I never regret having unfollowed those people, because it's just not worth it. It's not worth it to expose yourself to that stuff. And I know that's a solution for one person. That's not a solution for society. But I guess I honestly don't think there's a solution for society. I think all we can do is we can, if it's bad on purpose to make you click, make yourself not click.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess another part of how we can be the solution in this, to me, is just keep myself conscious and aware of the problem that I have, and try to not fall into the traps that I personally fall in. And I think the other thing I want to do, we used to have a what we've been watching section on this show, and when we transferred to the Doofcast, we took that away, because a lot of times it was a regular section and we were like, well, shit, I don't have anything this week. But I want to bring that back in a little bit of a different way. I want us to try to regularly point things out that people might not have seen that we've been seeing. To kind of be that service for people that, try to wade through the bullshit and get to stuff that you might not even know exists, but you would really love if someone told you about it.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. That's what's funny is that we've sort of relegated that sort of content to our tertiary shows. But no, I agree that's a valuable thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, it won't be every week. It won't, but I think this is important, and I think I want to do it because there's so much crap out there, and there's so much criticism out there, and I want to be the solution, not the problem. And so, go see movies with an open mind, see movies that disagree with the way you think, and don't hate them just because they disagree with the way you think. Is one thing I would suggest.
Yeah.
And maybe you can learn something about them. Doesn't mean you have to change your political opinion. Doesn't mean your political opinion is wrong. Doesn't mean your apolitical opinion is wrong, right? But it just means art should challenge us. And sometimes it challenges us by like showing us the thing we believe from a new angle. And sometimes it challenges us by showing the opposite of the thing you believe. And that's good.
Yeah, I agree. I guess my last comment on that would just be like, there's a difference between correctly identifying that Birth of a Nation has bad politics and like imposing an interpretation on something.
Sure,
It's like
sure.
those are very different operations. And
I agree.
And I think people know what they're doing when they do that, by the way. So, yeah.
And on that note, there's a new Star Trek show out this week, Matt. It's called Star Trek Brave New Worlds. And I watched the first episode today, and it's good.
Oh.
It's a good show.
What?
Yeah,
Huh?
Believe it or not. I haven't liked Star Trek Discovery. I have not liked Picard, but I heard good things about this new Star Trek show. And it's what is it? Let me think of the way I can. It's Star Trek.
Oh, I like Star Trek.
Yeah.
Cool. Check that out.
Yeah. It's a Star Trek show where like they explore and go to strange new worlds and then try to solve problems there.
Oh, it's been a while since we had a Star Trek show.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm so excited.
All right. I think that's it, right? I don't know if we solved anything today. It was good to kind of vent.
Yeah.
I'm curious what other people think the problems of criticism are, because like I think like the thing that I didn't want to talk about is like the problem with criticism is stupid cinema sins. Like everyone knows that, and we can just ignore that and not listen to it anymore. But this is another problem I've been having. So glad we got to talk about it.
Me too.
But that is all we have for you folks this week. If you have any opinions on Dr. Strangelove or on criticism in general, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, on Twitter at doofmedia, or at our subreddit r/doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, then please do so. You can find the Doofcast on every available podcasting platform and, of course, YouTube as well.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. While you are over at patreon.com/doofmedia voting for Dr. Strangelove, you can maybe sign up to be a member. You get a whole just metric shit ton of bonus content, including new bonus shows each and every week, like the Freeman Bros, which we talked about a little bit ago, and other levels of the Tower, our Stephen King show, and of course the incomparable High Ground, which is currently going through the Mummy movies right now. So all those and a huge backlog of bonus shows are available for you right now at patreon.com/doofmedia.
Very fun, very fun. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Every review that we get on there helps us get more exposure and introduces new folks to the content and the criticism that we're making here.
That is right. Next week on the show, Deconstructing Ridley Scott continues with the 5th film in our very long series. We're going to be watching and talking about Someone to Watch Over Me, a movie that Matt and I have both never seen and have zero idea what it's about at all.
No idea.
It's going to be fun. Hopefully it's good. It could be bad. I don't know. We'll find out next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.